Welcome to the Dansports.tips NFL preview show for the 2016 season. We are looking at the NFC South today. I'm going to start, obviously this is a division that holds the NFC champion Carolina Panthers, fresh off their 15-1 season last year, and a lot of not much else with Atlanta, New Orleans and Tampa Bay. I'm going to jump straight in with the Atlanta Falcons, who were at best average last year. They started 5-0 before flailing down the stretch and becoming the incredibly rare 5-0 team that does not go on to make the playoffs. Matt Ryan showed an alarming propensity to throw interceptions and generally make mistakes in the red zone. That is always going to hurt an offense. Julio Jones got injured again and played through it. Roddy White hit the wall. A pleasant surprise for this team was the emergence of Devontae Freeman on offense as a lead running back, but even he was quiet in the second half and smells an awful lot like a prime regression candidate for this season. This team has been affected really dating back to the day they traded up to draft Julio Jones by a lack of depth across the roster through the bevy of draft picks that they sent to, I think it was Cleveland in that trade, though especially on the defensive side. Alex Mack from Cleveland will help an offensive line that does need some assistance. They brought in Mohamed Sanu from Cleveland, which is in effect a like-for-like swap to replace the now departed Roddy White. The absence of Tony Gonzalez, the greatest tight end of his generation since he retired, has been felt hard by the Falcons. For them to have hopes of contending this year, they're going to need a fully healthy season from Julio Jones. Devontae Freeman is going to need to continue his first half of last season and do it for a full year. And Matt Ryan needs to cut out the mistakes he made in the red zone last year. The defense is where the issue lies. Desmond Trufant is an excellent corner, and while the team has athletes at linebacker, they don't tackle well, nor do they rush the passer. They rank last in the NFL as a defense for sacks last year, and even if they had two good corners, they only have one. There is only so long those corners can cover receivers if the opposing quarterback is afforded all day to deliver the football. I can't see what they've done to upgrade the pass rush need, and in a division that contains the Panthers, arguably they could be looking at a wild card if things pan out at the top end of predictions, but that's probably optimistic. The New Orleans Saints, I will start with some good news for New Orleans Saints fans. You have finally rid yourselves of Rob Ryan last year, and he is in Buffalo, so the architect of the NFL's worst defence's history. Dennis Allen took the reins for the defensive coordinator after Ryan left mid-season and continues in the role this year. The only money spent in free agency was on James Laurinaitis and Craig Robertson of the Browns, linebacker, and Roman Harper from the NFC champion Panthers, which hardly inspires faith. Laurinaitis certainly hasn't lived up to the hype, and the Rams' front seven succeeded in spite of rather than because of anything he did. Harper may well join the list of Panthers secondary players that produce with that front seven in front of them, and then look levels below that when they play away from Charlotte. Dennis Allen, when he coached the Raiders, they finished in the bottom of the league defensively for the 3 years he was there. Is he the answer for this Saints defense? I don't see much improvement in this defensive unit, in all honesty, though I cannot really imagine that they'll be worse than last year's team over 16 games. They look horribly weak at defensive end and corner, which suggests this team is going to be very susceptible to the pass again. Still, a team with Drew Brees at quarterback is always going to have a chance in games. Mark Ingram has seemingly developed into the rare Alabama running back who actually gets it done in the NFL after looking like a flame out in his first couple of seasons. Coby Fleener, who by his own admission is struggling with the playbook at the moment, has come in at tight end to replace Ben Watson, who skipped town for money in Baltimore before getting injured in training camp for the Ravens. He in turn replaced Jimmy Graham. This has a reputation on the back of what Graham and Watson did as a scheme that is good for tight ends. It remains to be seen if Fleener will continue that trend of productive tight ends in New Orleans. After all, the Colts had the choice of him or Dwayne Allen, and they let Fleener test free agency, and they would have a good reason for that, you would assume. Not that I trust the management in Indianapolis that much. This team looks built to follow a road of mediocrity until such time as Brees retires and Sean Payton walks as well. That will lead them into a full rebuild that's likely required to turn the defensive unit around. And once Brees has gone, the offense is going to need a lot of work too. I think that New Orleans are on pace to waste the last few years of Drew Brees' career, unfortunately. And yeah, it looks a mediocre 8-8, 7-9, 9-7-ish, middle of the pack range for the New Orleans Saints in my eyes this year. Moving on to the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers lost in the Super Bowl in somewhat underwhelming fashion, as offensively they were smothered by a Broncos defence that's one of the best we've seen. It is fair to say that the Panthers are going to regress from last year's 15-1 mark in the regular season. All of the metrics, whether you look at Football Outsiders DVOA or Pythagorean wins or strength of schedule, where they faced the easiest in the league last year, all point to the same thing. They have lost a large portion of their secondary, including Josh Norman, who is now in Washington and was arguably the league's best cornerback last year. The Panthers have also made a habit of alternating the good with the underwhelming over the last few years, sandwiching a 7-8-1 record between 12-4 and 15-1 seasons. They went 7-9 4 years ago as well. Funky things often happen with teams that lose in the Super Bowl the following year, but even with regression and curse built into this, it's difficult to see this team falling far enough for one of the other three teams in the division to catch them. All reports out of training camp have Kelvin Benjamin looking on track in return from the ACL injury that cost him last season. Devin Funchess is getting rave reviews as emerging in his second year. That will mean less Ted Ginn drops for the Panthers fans to have to endure, and Greg Olsen obviously will eat up his share of targets from the tight end position as well. Jonathan Stewart's ability to remain healthy will also be key for this team. Obviously Cam Newton as well has to remain healthy, but the offense, if anything, should be better than last year. And defensively, with rookies likely to make up a large portion of the secondary, that front seven is going to need to stay injury free and play at the elite level that the likes of Kuechly, Kawan Short and Thomas Davis have been able to produce. I see no reason why they won't, which likely will offer protection to those rookies at the back end. The Carolina Panthers are going to win football games this year. It's difficult to see them plummeting down to 7-9 as they've done after their last two good seasons that they've had. They are the best team in this division. Whether or not they're the best team in the NFC or the NFL remains to be seen, but another strong season looks on the cards for the Carolina Panthers. The final team in this division is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, there's quite a lot of promise shown in Tampa Bay, but they've been sort of one of those dark horse teams that people have liked to look at over the last few years and failed to deliver. They did take a step forward last year with Jameis Winston at quarterback. He was a very close second to Todd Gurley in a lot of people's eyes for the Offensive Rookie of the Year after a strong finish to the season. They fired Coach Lovie Smith. That is, unless you listen to Bill Simmons on the Ringer, who apparently still thinks he's the coach. I don't really have a problem with that move. Lovie had success with my Chicago Bears for many years, but his refusal to attack from the cover 2 defense makes him predictable, as there are known holes obviously in the cover 2. It makes it beatable. He is also, and never has been, an offensive mind, shown by the carousel of offensive coordinators when he was in Chicago, a hire that he never once got right in all of his years there. And that's where the concern lies for me. Tampa Bay elected to replace Lovie Smith with his offensive coordinator, Dirk Cutter, a man with minimal head coaching experience and a history of not much more than average performance as a coordinator. We can only hope he doesn't take any play calling advice from his new defensive coordinator, who is Mike Smith, formerly of the Atlanta Falcons, or we short see a load of 4th and 1 stuffed at the line. Mike Smith is not worlds away from Lovie Smith in terms of base defensive alignments. It's difficult to see how much will change due to the changes in coaching personnel at the top, and in all honesty, despite the presence of such gems in the front seven as Levante David, Gerald McCoy, and at the back end, at the back end, they've still got Chris Conte. That's just not good enough at safety for sure. Any Chicago fan can tell you that. I will assume that Mike Evans at wide receiver is going to drop less passes this year. He hadn't shown that prior to last season. He hadn't shown stone hands like Ted Ginn. I don't expect Doug Martin to follow up on last year. He was second in the NFL in rushing yards. Particularly now the excellent Logan Mankins is no longer in the line at Tampa Bay. Compensating for that, however, is expected improvement from Jameis Winston going into year 2. Ultimately, that's where this team's chances lie. The free agent dealings have generally been like for like. It's much the same, maybe slightly downgrading on talent from last year. At least they got their kicker in the second round of the draft. If Winston doesn't take the next step, then potentially this team... If Winston does take the next step, potentially this team is a wild card. It's difficult to imagine a team from the South making a wild card this year when you assume that the West, who the South will be facing, will send 2 teams. That being said, the North and the East don't look particularly strong. It's not outrageous, but Tampa haven't had a winning season in over 5 years. Is this the year that's going to happen? I'm going to say no. The bets I'm going to place on this division are under 7.5 wins for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think they're more likely to consolidate or regress a little bit this year. I can't understand why if your head coach isn't good enough, why you promote from within. I'm going to take the New Orleans Saints to concede over 430.5 points. That is below the number that they conceded last year. The defense will be better this year, but it still doesn't look... It still looks like the worst unit in the NFL. So I certainly think that New Orleans could find themselves in shootouts with... it was either that or taking over on the points with New Orleans getting involved in shootouts. But as they face the NFC West and I believe the AFC West as well, which is a couple of good divisions with some defenses in them, I've gone with them to concede points because teams like Arizona and Seattle don't necessarily give up the points, but they do pile on when they're beating you. Julio Jones to be the top touchdown scorer for the Atlanta Falcons this year at 6-4 looks a solid bet, and an outside chance on the basis of the reviews that he's received, and with Kelvin Benjamin back to take some of the pressure off of him, I'll take Devin Funchess to be the top Carolina touchdown scorer this year. You don't generally have to worry about running backs because Jonathan Stewart and Cam Newton split those. The main danger in this market, I think, is probably going to be Greg Olsen. I'd cover him if I was scheming against the Panthers in the red zone. You might just get some one-on-one with Funchess, who is 6'4". He's a big receiver. I think there's chances at 12-1 that he could score the most touchdowns for the Carolina Panthers this year. That's my preview of the NFC South. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, give me a follow on Twitter at Dansports.tips. Let me know in the comments what you think is going to happen in the NFC South this year. Check back later on for the rest of the NFC. See you later.